So what if I want to, for example, uncomment this bit that's going to dump in a texture source that looks at my base assets, that grabs null, and then finds the channel number, right? Matches the namespace for this. So let's go ahead and let's try just touch starting here. Bada bing, bada boom. And you could say, well, you know, that's great, but what if, why didn't I just grab these nulls over here? Well, we didn't just grab these nulls over here because that gives you one other layer of abstraction for being able to, say, rearrange the content order of these without having to reach all the way down to those outputs, right? So now you can think about driving that just from the assets object rather than having to drive that all the way down at the videos or at the output layer themselves. Okay, there's another sweet goober that we might be able to do. And that's, we can see here, these have different colors because one's an LED wall, one's a projector, one's an LCD screen. If back in here in our config file, if it was maybe 3 projectors instead, right? Projector, projector, projector. Let's save that. Let's move all the way back up to the top of our project. Let's touch start. Okay, well, these all have the same borders. If I'm trying to figure out where projectors overlap, I might want them to all have unique borders. I want them to have special snowflake colors so I can figure out which one is which. Well, this would be a great set of data to actually throw inside of our base data up here, right, at the top of our network. Let's add a noise top. Let's go ahead and make this say, I don't know, we're not, 256 channels across would be a healthy number of channels. So let's say 256 on the noise page. Let's make that totally random, pseudo-random. Let's flip off that monochrome. Okay, let's hook up a null to this. Alt-N, oh my god, I love that. And I'm going to call it rand color. I'm going to bump up here. I'm going to swap back. Actually, let's dive into our output, into our draw for 1 minute, and let's make sure that we understand the parameter name. So this is border color R. Let's check back over here in our draw extension. We can see here that there's a little bit of code that's commented out for us. So let's swap that around. Whoops. Let's make sure that we've uncommented its commented outness, so comment it back in, I guess. And we can see here that we want to set the nose parameter border R. Let's make sure that's in fact border color R, and border color G, and border color B to be an expression, right? So we're actually going to grab this here above, right? So it's border color R, that parameter, set as an expression, and we're going to format this like big long goober up here to match and dump it in. What is that going to do for us? Well, let's bump up here. Let's go ahead and in our settings, let's just touch start on the draw, and we should see womp womp, something broke. Okay, well, let's figure out what that was. Let's clear that. Let's make sure, oh, it looks like our expression is not quite right. Op.data.op, oh, you know what? Let's check to make sure that all the way up here, this in fact, no global shortcut. Shame on us. When we set up this data object, we didn't give it a global shortcut. Data, our border showed up. Let's zoom inside. Let's save this so that we make sure that those changes happen. Now we could actually adjust the seed color here. So let's look a little too similar. All right. We could pump the amplitude and the offset. And we could find a nice set of random colors, that give us enough differentiation so that when these projectors are overlapping, we can see where their boundaries are. If you're still scratching your head about what happened, let's look down here at our channels again. So we actually dumped in an expression that's sampling from that random color null, and it's using the same x coordinate, right, as the digit of the container, -1, so we start at 0, and this y coordinate 0. So if we go from each one of these to the next, we should see this, right? So 0, 1, okay, 2. So as we add more and more of these, we're going to be able to make sure that back, up, zoom out, in over here, we start to grab pixels to define these border colors from this predefined set of noise. Why would we do that? The noise is pseudo-random, so this noise will be the same, generated the same way on as many different machines as this project runs on, which means that we have a nice way of, even if there are projectors that are being run off of multiple different machines, we're all pulling from the same conception of what a random color might be. Whew. That's an awful lot of cool, wild, crazy stuff for us to have pulled apart here. And hopefully this will give you a chance to think about how might you modularize and think about the approach that you're building for building components that you can kind of quickly swap in and out, move around, think about differently. That's the exciting part of this particular kind of approach. We can see one other, well, we can't quite see one other example of that because we'd have to do a little bit more work. But you can definitely see how that works here with our projectors, right? Because we know right away, just from our config file, that as long as we change what's going on here, LED, oh my goodness, you gotta spell it right, LED, projector, we come back up to the top, we restart our file, LED, projector, right? So there's a lot of cool bits here that gives us a crazy amount of flexibility in simplifying the hardest parts of working with touch, which is typically having a flexible way to approach multiple different types of projects and swap objects in and out with ease and with grace. Whew. You made it with me, everybody. Hope that helps. There's lots more to come. Pull apart the repo. Take a look at the example also. I'm going to pull the example back on over here. You'll see here in example land that there's some other fun stuff about how we can think about working with our controller and how we could build a little drop-down menu for actually swapping our content in. That's fun and exciting. Gives us a little bit more flexibility in how we think about that. And you'll notice here that the same idea works, right? So here's our controller. On our common page, we can actually see that, sure enough, that points out to a controller that lives inside of our modules. So you could similarly have a different configuration of controllers that you might want to swap in and out for different projects, depending on which kind of control panel is exposed. And you could do that really simply and easily. In fact, let's do that just real fast. Okay, so let's dive in. There's our controller. All right, so far so good. Let's move back over here to large systems. In modules, we've got this container controller. Okay, let's actually just copy paste that. And let's, for right now, actually, before we copy paste that, let's not do that just yet. It'll make trouble for us. But let's here on our controller, give it a name like controller 1. No, yes to all for now, for sure, because we're going to fix a bunch of things. So here on the common page, let's go ahead and get rid of that external talks. Let's dive inside. Let's Control S. We're going to save this comp only. We're going to put it in modules. Let's save it. And now we need to set up a few other little goobers. So controller has an extension. We're going to borrow that extension. And we're going to add that here to controller 1 because we happen to need that extension to make sure that everything starts up correctly. And back here, you know what, let's go ahead and let's add a button. In fact, what you should be doing is probably opening up the palette over here. And from UI, we've got some widgets. And you could do things like, maybe I want to pull in a header. Right, there it is. I can see it there at the bottom. And maybe I want to like pull in a float. Okay, cool. Scooch that up over here. Let's bring this over here. We could open up this little lovely helper here. We could bounce this up. Let's set the layout for this, or the children to be like, say, top to bottom. Okay, sure, why not? Right, you can see how we could start like making some interesting changes here. Maybe another one of these floats. Okay, groovy. Now I'm gonna, while I'm in here, home, I'm gonna Control S, save, right? I'm gonna overwrite this thing that I just made. Let's go back this time to our config file. And down here for our, or excuse me, up here for our nodes, we've got container controller, but we have a container controller 1 now. So what if we change that? Let's save it. Let's bounce up. Let's bounce up again. One more time. Let's go ahead and restart touch. There's our new container, right? There's our new controller that we made. I don't want to use this controller for this show. I want to go back and use just my regular controller, right? Let's make sure that our file path in our config file points back to our original controller. Let's start it. We've gone back to our original controller. So now we have a way to swap in interfaces without having to make lots of big, crazy systemic changes across our project. All right, that's way too much. That's a huge mountain of information to unpack and think about. Pull apart the repo, play with it, start to think about how you might configure projects from the get-go, and have some ways to really push and extend some of the ideas that you're fighting with. All right, happy programming, everyone, and see you all on the other side.